What's up, everybody? We haven't spoken in a while, but we are back and we have some new stuff to talk about. So today what I'm going to cover is our newest statistics feature release that we're including in the Omnia portal, and it is the QStats that we've ported over from our old system, polished up a little better, made it a little more involved, and give you a lot more transparency there than what we've offered in the past. So we're going to jump right into it. There's a lot here, so I'm going to cover it as fast as I can without skipping over the important stuff. And as always, if you guys would reach out to us, let us know what you like, what you don't like, how we're doing, so we can continue to improve and make this better for you. So we're going to hop right in. So now under your dashboard for you admins when you land, before we go in, so this feature will be available to account administrators. It will be available to reporting admins who can only view this reports section here, and it will also be available to queue managers. The queue managers, of course, will be scoped to seeing only data for queues to which they're assigned. So we're going to hop right in. We're going to go into under the reports section here and drop into queues. So what you'll see here, your initial tab is queue activity. So this tab here is scoped to a single queue. You can kind of quick load queues right here from this drop down real fast. I'm going to switch to one with some data so we can kind of go through that. And you can see right here that this has a little bit of data for the last 10 days. So kind of like our other statistics things, we default to the last 10 days. You have a quick selector here if you want to switch between last 10 and last 30. We have filtering options. And we also have a bunch of metrics down here that will apply to the primary queue that you have selected here and the date range that you have selected in your filter. If you hover your filter, you can kind of see that default date range, and that's your last 10 days of data there. So let's kind of hop into this and just glance at it. So at a glance here, you have a basically inbound. It's all inbound queue. It's scoped to only queue things. Things are hitting the queue itself. It's somewhat independent of agent and independent of any type of outbound traffic that your agents are doing. We'll find that in another module. So if you look here, you can just see this data real quickly in bar graph form. We can switch to 30 days, more data will render us a line graph instead. I'm going to flip that back. All right, and then you'll notice down here all these little widgets. So this is just to give you a quick snapshot and a little bit more granular view of the things that you're looking at here. So you'll see like how many calls are completed in this time range. You can toggle the average, you can toggle the percentage. The average will always be scoped to your distribution that you have selected, and we'll cover more of that later. So you will see that. You will see your abandoned data for the course of all of this time. And you can see here that it's actually just this day. So you can see pretty easily that there's 2 abandoned and we're showing 2 here. So this data is pretty easy to look at because we don't have a lot of activity on our test queue here. So you can see the abandoned, same thing here. You can toggle these. You can look at your average, which is always, again, scoped to your distribution that you have selected. You can see the amount of refused events. Now, these events don't necessarily correspond to unique calls. It's just every time an agent is hit and refused happens. Or they move on, the call moves on to another person. And you can kind of look at these and see how many of those events happen, average per whatever distribution you have selected. Talk time, same thing here. This is your total talk time. If you click on your average here, you can actually see that the per day, the daily distribution that we have selected here, and you can see actually a per call metric here in the bottom right, and that tells you about on average how long each call is lasting. Wait time, same type of deal here. We kind of exhibit the shortest and the longest. And you click on average, you can see the average wait time for a call, the average total wait time per day, and the actual average wait time per call based on this date range here. We're showing some information about calls that are transferred out of the queue. So attended transfers, blind transfers, you can see a little bit. We break those down for you here, this number here being the total. And you can kind of see those averages on a daily basis, and then the percentage of calls that are actually blind transferred out or attended transfer out. So that kind of wraps up the dashboard itself and what we're showing here. So where this really gets fun is kind of like the other statistics modules. You can hop into this filter, and this filter is going to give us a lot of power. Okay, so in the filter, of course, you can select a date range, so we can scope it down to today. We can look at the last 3 months. We can look at the last week. But this goes back as far as 6 months. So feel free to play with that. Just to show an example of kind of how the distributions work, we'll look at a monthly. So let's select the last 3 months. We'll continue to look at test queue, but as you can see, you can select different queues here. So this will bind to whatever this is. So if you change this select over here outside of this filter, when you open the filter, it will be the selected Q that you have. So we're just going to leave it as test Q for now. We're looking at last 3 months. Let's look at a monthly distribution, and we will just go with that for now. So this will break it down for you over the last 3-month period, right? From April back to about the middle of January, and that will show you the data along that date range that you can look again at this filter. So the last 3 months of data. So we're going to go a little further. So the filtering thing, this is where the fun is. This is where you can kind of analyze your data and get a little more granular. So we can filter by a user. So we can scope down to a user for this queue very specifically and see what their metrics look like compared to the overall. In addition to that, we have these secondary metrics that we can plot against. The rate of abandonment on the distribution basis, you can plot it against another queue if you want to. So you can plot it against calls that are answered in 30 seconds, outbound complete calls. You can plot it against exits that happen, exit with key and exit with timeouts. You can plot it against talk time and wait time. So that'll give you some extra things to kind of compare with there, and those will plot on the secondary axis. So what we're going to do is, just for fun, I'm going to click on another queue, and this will allow you to select from the queues again. So let's just select, I don't know, let's just select support. There probably won't be much traffic here, it's just to show an example. So we're going to update that. So now you can see these lines plotted. So on your left axis, that range right there is going to be for your primary data. Notify right here, indicated by complete, abandoned, and refused. And then you'll see the other metrics with the support flag in parentheses there to show you that's your lines for the other queue that you plotted against. And you can see that range over here that will correspond to that secondary data that you plotted. So we can go in and let's just do another secondary metric. So let's just look at let's say like abandon rate. Okay, we're still looking at test queue. We're not doing any filtering for the users. We're just looking at the queue as a whole. We'll update that. And this kind of show you, on a percentage basis over here, the abandon rate over time, and you can kind of look at your call volume and see what your call volume is compared to your abandon rate, and that's give you a pretty good indication of kind of what's happening with your abandonment, as a function of your amount of calls that you have, your call influx to the queue. So this should be really, really helpful for you guys to very, very easily look at just overall snapshots on a daily basis, monthly basis. You have hourly basis. We do limit that to a certain time range window just because of the amount of data. But that'll allow you a real quick snapshot to see it. And you can filter this all the way down to a day. So let's just, for the sake of ease, let's just select, let's say April 16th, just till the 1st of tomorrow, right? So that will be all day today. And we can look at a daily distribution there. We can plot that again against abandon rate. That's fine. Let's do it against something else. Let's plot it against calls answered in 30 seconds. So there may not be any data here. We'll just have to see. All right. So yeah, no data for this queue here, but you can see how that works. So it is plotting up to the 17th. Now we won't have any data on the 17th, obviously, because that is a future date. So that's kind of how that works. So the last thing I want to mention here, as far as the filtering goes, is you can filter this to a user. So this is really neat. So you can say, let's filter test queue. Let's filter it by a user. Let's pick somebody out of the list. So these will be, when you search for this, it'll be expecting you to search for agents that service this queue that you have selected, and just select that. All right, we're going to update that. All right, and over this 10-day date range that we have selected, this is kind of what it looks like just for this agent. All right, all these stats will update just for this agent. So one place this could be really useful, I think would be a great example is, let's say that this agent services, 2 or 3 different queues, right? And you want to do a comparison on a queue by queue basis. You can actually compare this data to that agent for another queue. So in the filter, so we have test queue, we're filtering by this user. We can actually go in and say, I want to plot that against another queue. And let's say support, right? So I know that this agent services support as well. So it's going to filter both sets of data to this user. So when I update this, I can actually compare, and of course our data is kind of slim here, not much happening, but I can compare the filtered data from one queue to another for this specific user and kind of see what their volume looks like. Maybe they're not doing very much in one queue. Maybe they're just overloaded in another queue. It'd be very easy for you to see that thing visually without much trouble at all. So let's reset this guy here. So that's kind of the queue activity. Again, scope to a single queue. You can quick load queues here. One cool thing I'll mention about the quick load, let's say that I have set up some filtering here, like by user, and let's just do our other example that we did, and I've updated this. And let's say I've got all this data. These filters are kind of where I want them. You can actually just quick load. I can just switch to support, and that's going to maintain the integrity of all my filters. You notice we still have the live reset button. You'll notice the filter still says the same things. So none of these things will change just because you quick load the queue. So you can apply filters across queues very quickly without having to reset. So that's a super useful thing to kind of help you sift through data quickly once you're looking at what you want to look at. All right, so I'll reset this guy. So we will go back to test queue, show some more data there. I think we are good to go on this one. So if you guys have any questions about this, I mean, there's a good bit of data here to look at. So, look at it. Let us know if you have any issues. And let us know if we're doing okay. I mean, we want some feedback on this stuff. It helps us to continue to get better. All right. So next, we're going to move on to our second tab here. So this is a QSummary tab. So this is basically a like a tabular view of what we just looked at. Right, so it's an exportable table. We can configure this thing and export data as we see fit. It will render all the queues in your system at once, so you don't have to select one queue at a time. Makes comparison very, very easy. So you can see here all 5 queues that I have access to are listed here. You have the same type of filtering mechanism. Lots of data here: inbounds, inbound completes, inbound abandons, refused, transfers, talk times, hold times, the same things we looked at in the previous dashboard. The only difference being this is scoped to multiple queues at once instead of a single queue. You can do the same types of things with your filtering here, so we'll just hop right off into that. The filtering, you can choose your date range again, like everything else. And the distribution here is a little bit unique compared to the others. You can select no distribution. Let's say you just want flat data, right? I just want flat data for the time range. I don't want to see a breakdown by day or hour or any of those things. You can do that with the none, and we default to that for you. It makes your exports a little easier to organize and read, but obviously the data is not quite as granular. So you can do hourly, daily, monthly, and agent distribution. So agent distribution is kind of the unique one here. So what this will do is these distributions will either break down. Let's say we select daily, and let's just do that. So we'll update that, and now you'll see you have a drop down arrow here, and it breaks down the QStat summary basically as a daily, as just breaks down daily by daily totals. And all these times again are just the, basically the chunk of time that contributes to this total row right here. You can do that daily, again, monthly, hourly. We can do, let's just select, let's select yesterday. We'll just do that. We'll just throw a time range in there for yesterday. We'll select that. We'll do an hourly distribution. We'll update that. So now you can see these things broken down hourly. I think you can select a couple days, across a couple days for an hourly distribution if you want to see that much data. And that's the reason for your timestamp format here, just in case you have a couple days of data. So you can view all this data here on an hour by hour basis and see which hours contribute to the biggest influx for that day. You can also, this to me is kind of the cool one, so you can distribute by agent. So this will break down the stats on an agent per agent basis. So let's just grab, let's just have a little fun here and do the last 3 months broken down by agent. So we'll update that. So now test queue, this is where we do a lot of our testing for queue things, so we can look at that. So you can see here, instead of date or time, we have name. So these are all the agents that service this queue, and all this data here is basically the breakdown of this summary on an agent per agent basis. So this is a really nice exportable file for you guys. This can be used in conjunction with the agent activity, which we're going to move on to next. This allows you to maybe compare agents that service multiple queues and see what their volumes are like respective to each queue. We'll do an example of that. So let's say we're really only interested in test queue and support. So we can go here and filter by queues. We can select support. We can select test queue. We can update that. Now you'll notice the other 3 are gone. We only have these 2, so we filter by that. We're filtering these by agents. You can gear into these, And you can really quickly see some different volumes. Like, so Anthony has 9 completed here in the support queue and 0 here. So he's doing a lot more work in the support queue. Makes sense. You know, he's a support guy, right? So you can easily just see this. So these six or seven users here, you can easily compare them if they service this queue and just see some data across queues. It's going to help you manage your staff a little bit. We think it's a pretty useful thing to give you some transparency on how loaded down or how much traffic certain agents are handling respective to their queues that they service. All right, so we'll just reset that. And again, this data is exportable. You just click this export. It'll give you a confirmation. Do you want to export all the data for X amount of queues? You do that, and it will dump a file for you, and you're good to go. That file will reflect things just as they're shown right here in this table. Only difference being these times will actually export in seconds. We like to do the raw data there, just in case you're using this for any other program, or you want to import this data elsewhere. That raw seconds data is a little bit better to work with than this time format we have here. Okay, so that pretty much does it. Again, a lot of this functionality is like what you guys are used to with the stats. This is it's queues. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a little bit more involved than some of the call summary stuff and the call statistics stuff we've had before, because we're getting really granular, looking at agent specifics, hourly specifics, and really gearing down in there and letting you guys see as much as we can possibly give to you. So that's it for that one. Not really a lot different there than the previous tab, just a different way of viewing the data and being able to view more than just the visual aspect of one queue at a time on the other tab. So next we'll move on to agent activity. So this is probably one of the most loaded parts of this feature. There's a lot going on here. We are going to render for you as many queues as we can in this view, up to 10. So if you're a larger account and you have 50, 100 plus queues, you'll start out with the first 10 that you have access to. A lot of you queue managers may not even have that many, so that may make it really easy to load them all in one. Otherwise, you'll be able to filter in and pick the queues you want to see, and this data will export just as you see it here. So you'll have a row with your header for your queue, and you have all your data. The same thing, queue, all your data. So it'll export exactly that manner for you. Super useful here. Lots of cool stuff we can do here. Okay, so this is a little bit more granular look at the queue statistics on an agent by agent basis. So instead of just showing inbound data on the queue, we're actually showing more about the agent activity, such as, well, how many outbounds did they make? You can see that column right here. How many outbound answers did they send out for the day? You can see data like, well, outbound talk time instead of just looking at inbound. And then we also are including all of the measurements of pause time, logged in time, and work time. Now, one thing I kind of want to mention about these metrics here, they do depend on your strategy. I mean, if your agents aren't really using the pause data on a daily basis, kind of as it's intended to be used, or using log in and log out, normally maybe they're not because of their queue strategy or something like that, then some of this data may be just 0, or it may be kind of like, well, what's that? This is because this person's not using that, and they've been logged in for a really long time. And that's basically the gist of it there. So this data here does depend. These clock events, they do depend on how your agents use those clocking features in Omnia, pause and unpause, and logging in and logging out, and during their shifts. So what we're going to go do here is it shows all this data. So you have all your queue related data for your inbound calls, how many calls are refused, what kind of wait time each agent has, when calls ring them, how many calls they're like the average time people wait for them. So we've got their total talk time for the calls. And again, this data, it starts out as last 10 days, like we're always doing it, and we can filter that and get granular down to, look at just today, or look at, last week, however we want to do that. So an example that I think is really useful to show here is, obviously it lives here in our filtering capabilities. We got a lot of magic we can do here. So your distributions here work just like the others. You're going to have hourly, daily, monthly. You can select your date range just like any of the others. And as far as your filters go, we can filter by queue and we can filter by users. And I'll allow you to select groups of queues and groups of users, so you're not stuck to just one. So let's just start with queues and make it, kind of a simple example. Let's just say, again, we'll keep going what we've been going. We want our support and we want our testing, right? So I'm going to select those. I'm going to update. Now you'll see our data only reflects these 2 queues that we have selected. Again, this is a great way to do kind of what we did in the QSummary tab, where we did a quick comparison. But this allows us to look at pause times and look at log in and log out times and things like that specific to the agents, just to kind of see what they're doing, throughout their day, outside of just the inbound stats, right? So we have outbound as well. I know a lot of our customers, depend on those stats as well, to know how their agents are performing for their outbound requirements. So we've given that to you here under agent activity. It is important to know that outbounds do not scope to queue, right? Because a queue is an inbound type deal only. So you'll notice here for Anthony, we have 64 outbounds and we have 64 outbounds. That's because Anthony had 64 outbounds. That was how many outbounds left his extension. So you shouldn't really expect these numbers in the outbound column to be different from queue to queue. The numbers you'll see change are things like pause time, logged in time, your talk time, all these inbound metrics here, and all your clock events. Those are things that will be different. So one cool thing that I really like to issue as an example here is the user filtering. So the user filtering is really cool. Let's just reset here. All right, so we're back to our default. We're going to go to our filter, and I'm just going to say let's just look at Monday to, let's say, the end of day Thursday. I'm just going to select here, go all the way to the end, and we're going to go from Monday to basically almost right up to midnight on Thursday night, right? So select that, and I'm going to say, well, I know that Anthony is in the test queue and the support queue, right? We just saw that. So I just want to look at Anthony's activity. I don't really care, I don't really want to look at necessarily one specific queue. I just want to see all of it. So you can go into users and say, well, I want Anthony, right? Select Anthony. So notice when we do this, every queue that Anthony's a part of, we're going to render data for him. And so you can see that happening right here. And so again, this data, you can look at your filter here, give you a quick idea of what you're looking at. Right now, that's giving us our date range, the distribution we have selected. We don't have one selected right now. So let's just, let's do that. Let's select the distribution. Let's go with daily. So daily for, the 3 or 4 days we have selected here. And now we can dip in, and we can even compare very quickly for a single user across multiple queues what their data looks like on a daily basis, matched up. So very easy to look at, very easy to see, and kind of compare what's going on queue to queue. So again, another great tool for managing your staff and helping your people. Something we think is really important and useful for you guys. As far as the filtering goes, that's really it. The rest kind of works the same. You have monthly, you have hourly. Again, hourly is limited to kind of a time frame based on, because we don't want to select a month of hourly. That would be, crazy amount of data to sift through. So I think it's like a couple days that we have there limited to, something like that. So you can do that. So let's just kind of do that example real quick. Let's just do real quick 14th to the 15th, and let's select an hourly distribution. We'll just keep it filtered to Anthony. That'll be perfectly fine. And so now you'll see this data gives you the hour by hour basis versus the daily basis that we have before, just for that day, for the 14th, basically right until midnight on the 15th. Okay, so that kind of covers that. Let's see here. This data, again, can be exported. I mentioned that already. So just hit that export button, and it will say, hey, you're exporting data from 2 queues. Yep, I want to do that. Okay, you'll have your file, and you can do what you will with it. Same note on the time here. That time will export out in seconds for you. All these will be zeros, of course, as you can see here. But as you're looking at that data, that's what that raw data will be as of now. All right, so I'm just going to reset this data. We'll get another glance at kind of what that looks like when we land there. And that's pretty much all there is to agent activity. So it's a very loaded feature. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do here to kind of manipulate this along with the data from the other tabs that we've covered to really get a clear picture of what's going on, from an agent by agent basis, from just a queue overall basis. Should give you guys a whole lot of visibility, and that's kind of what we're going for here. Just as much data as we can possibly pile in to make your lives easier, make your employees' lives easier, so they can, be managed well and helped out with where they may be loaded down. So next, we are going to finish this up with QLog. So that's our final tab here. Click into this guy. Okay, so what QLog is it's kind of a raw look at events that are happening in queues. Okay, so again, this will be scoped to any queues you have control over for queue managers, and for admins and reporting admins, you'll be able to see any queues you want here. This is going to allow you to replace some of the functionality that we've deprecated in the old recent activity tab. One thing being like login time. So login is just an event, and QLog, as I've said, is basically a conglomerate of all the events that are happening in a queue. They include login, logout, pause, unpause, exit key events, exit timeout events, complete events where the caller hangs up first, complete events where the agent hangs up first, refused events or ring no answer events. So all of those things that you can look at, transfer events, attended transfer events, blind transfer events. You see all these things here we can look at very granularly and decide how to very, very easily look at certain types of events. So a couple examples here that I think are useful is, let's just say it's, end of the day. People have logged in, people have logged out, they've worked a shift. I've set this kind of up so as to look at it. So like yesterday, let's just go 15 to 16. So right up to midnight and 16, we're going to select that. And I'm going to say, I just want to look at test queue. So one cool thing here is you can simultaneously filter by queue and user. So you don't have to pick one or the other, like queues and then see all the users. You can select the queue and then gear down even further into the users if you want. We're not going to do that for now. We're just going to look at test queue, and I'm going to click here and say, I just want to look at login and logout. I just want to see when everybody got on the clock basically and started working. So you can do that right here. So in the previous recent activity, we kind of had that as an extra little table in there. So we deprecated that out and removed it. And this is where you'll see that data now. So update. And there we go. So I can see very quickly all these events in order of descending time when login and logouts happen. So there you go. You know when your agents got on the clock or when they didn't. Okay, so I'm going to reset that data. All right. So that will allow you to see that type of thing. Let's say you want to, you're not necessarily 100% interested in how much time somebody was paused, but you just kind of want to see a quick view of their pause detail events. So let's see, we've got some examples of that right here that happened last night. We were doing some testing. So let's just look at that. Let's go to queues and we'll go a step further. We'll say test queue and we'll say, I want to look at the general here and I want to see pause data. So pause and unpause. All right, and we're going to update that. So now I can look at yesterday's data and I can see every bit of that. And so right now we're actually looking at the last 10 days. So let's go ahead and scope that to like we did before. Let's just say the 15th up until today. Let's just do that. And we'll do that. Okay, so there's all their pause and unpause events. And you can see all these reasons here. So that'll give you your pause detail that you kind of need from an overheads perspective, the time that they actually committed the pause, outside of just seeing the totals like on the agent activity. So you can combine those things, all right, and use all this data together to make whatever assumptions or decisions you need to make. Okay. So another thing I want to mention here, so this is just something to play with, guys. There's a lot here. You can really get granular. You can look at, timeouts that happen when callers come into the queue. You can look at when callers press an exit key and leave. And you can actually, a bonus that we've added here is you can view the call. So before we had this refuse tracking thing in our old tab where you can click on a refuse call and you can kind of see its origination and see it throughout the queue. So now what we've done is we have included our call flow capability into this, so you can actually see really what happened with the call from before it came in your queue all the way till it came in your queue. And so what we're going to do is just show an example of that. I'll show you a quick way to get that. So let's just say, again, I'm an admin for the account, so I can see all the queues. But let's say it was my responsibility to look at test queue. It was my responsibility yesterday, right? So let's pick that. Let's pick yesterday. Let's filter it to yesterday. Let's say we want all users, right? And I want to look at calls. Like I just want to see the calls that came in the system. So let's look at the complete calls. So I can filter these out real quick. Okay. And transfers, they are complete calls, but we'll leave those out for now. So a complete call is a normal completed call. When it says complete caller, that means the caller hung up first. When it says agent, that means the agent hung up first. So that's a nice little level of visibility as well. And maybe you have, someone say, my call dropped or something like that. Well, you can actually look at this event and say, well, actually the caller hung up. Or, oh yeah, your end hung up. Maybe we need to look into that. So it's just an extra layer of visibility there. Really, really nice stuff. So let's just update that. So yesterday for test queue, we're going to look at the complete events. All right, so here's some here. You will see these complete events actually show the caller name and the caller number. Looks like some of these headers need to be adjusted here, but we'll get to that. And so one thing you can take one step further here is when you when you have an event that is actually like a termination event, so a transfer out, a call completed, an exit event, anything like that, an abandoned event, you can actually examine that call. So let's just do that. So we're going to click on this one right here. And this is going to pop our call tracking functionality for this. Now again, this is available to admins. This is available to these queue events, but only for queues you have access to, say if you're a queue manager. So we can see this, yeah, so this number was dialed, it went to test queue, it dialed this person answered and hung up. Pretty normal call, nothing special there, right? So let's take it a step further, just one more quick example. Let's go back to the filter and let's say, well, I don't want to look at complete, let's look at abandons, right? Let's look at refused. Let's look at both of these. So not much to look at here for this queue, but we do have a refused event here. We don't have an abandoned, we do have a refused. So we can say, okay, this call, James missed this basically. We don't know what happened, but we can actually examine this call and see what eventually ended up happening to it. So we'll click on this. And here we go. So the call again dialed this number, went to our queue. Dialed me, I hung up, so I missed the call. So that's my refuse right there. And then it dialed 1001, the general. The general actually answered the call and then hung up as normal. So this call was answered. It was a refused event, but it ultimately resulted in an answered call. So it was not missed by the queue completely. So that'll give you a really quick way and a better way to look at the call flows instead of what we had previously in the recent activity tab on the dashboard for those of you that use that in the queue dashboard. Kind of the last thing to mention is that is gone. So we've removed the recent activity tab. You can see that here, no longer here. That's going to make your performance on this page much better. That's going to make your load times better, just everything in general better. And so now we've centralized everything into this new queue stuff. And this is going to just make your life easier. You have one place to go to get all the data you need. If you want to look at averages, I think that was kind of the last thing on that old tab. Averages are not hard to look at, right? You can go to QSummary or agent activity, even queue activity. You can get it from there, right? You can filter to a user, you pick your time range, and there you go. So that'll help you out with that as well. So I think that kind of covers it all. There's a lot here, so I kind of expect questions. If you guys have them, please ask. Enjoy this. I hope this is going to help your workflow out incredibly. And if it doesn't, let us know. But we definitely don't hope to hear that. If you have any questions, if you find any bugs, if you notice any problems, please reach out to us. We want to make sure it's fixed. Again, this is to make your life easier. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoy the new feature and see you next time.